Now, I'm sure we have all heard the all too popular phrase, my teammates suck. And not only have you heard this, but I bet you've also said it before. Now, of course, I'm not denying that all of you have had bad teammates before, because I myself have been paired with some bad players in my Rocket League career. Yeah, that didn't last too long. But what if I told you that it's not entirely your teammate's fault for losing with a bad teammate? Well, I'm here today to explain to you why exactly your bad teammate is not entirely at fault for your losses. So sit back, relax, and enjoy this episode. Now, for starters, what is a bad teammate? Well, there is no real definition to what a bad teammate is. Because here's the thing. A bad teammate could just be a player that doesn't play to the skill level of the rank you're actually in. It could also mean a player that might just be on a bad day that isn't performing well. And finally, it could also mean a player that doesn't gel well with you. And I want to emphasize on that final point because you're going to find a lot of people, especially if you solo queue, that just aren't compatible with your style of play. And I know how annoying it is not having people adapting to how you want to play, and that's why I'm making this video. You see, one of the most underrated skills in Rocket League is the ability to adapt to teammates. And you might ask why this skill is so underrated, but there are going to be teammates that you get that might love ball chasing, that might love playing aggressively, and that might love playing passively. And what are you supposed to do in scenarios like that? Well, let's take the 3 examples I just used and put them into perspective. For scenario 1, we're going to be using the ball chasing teammate. Now, for ball chasers, what you need to understand is that you're going to have a teammate that is consistently on the ball and that just loves touching the ball. And in a scenario like this, it all really just depends on how your teammate moves throughout the match, because ball chasers come in so many different ways. They could just keep cutting rotations and go for the ball. They could just come and take the ball off you, and they can also double commit on the ball consistently when you're going up for it. And I feel like this is the most difficult of the 3 to adapt to, solely because it really just depends on how your teammate moves. So in order to adapt to a teammate that consistently ball chases, you need to monitor their movement for a little bit during the game to see how they move, how they rotate, and how they commit onto the ball. And one thing about ball chasers you need to understand, most likely you're going to be on the defensive end for most of the game. Moving on to scenario number 2, we have the player that just is always aggro, always going up. Now, this guy isn't necessarily a ball chaser, but he just doesn't rotate back. This guy loves staying on the attacking end and loves staying in position to score. He's just a natural number 9 goal scorer, if that makes sense. Now, there are 2 ways to go about a teammate like this. Number 1, and the most obvious one, is to also stay on the defensive end throughout the entire game. This one's probably the safer option and the more reliable one for the both of you because it's less risky and puts you in a better position to score and defend at the same time. It's also the actual proper way to play if you have someone who's an aggressor and then you need someone kind of hovering back. Scenario 2, and the more risky way to play, is playing a little more upfield as a support mechanism for your teammates, but also staying on the defensive end of things. Now, what do I mean by this? What I mean is instead of staying at midfield or a third of the way there, I mean get in front of net and wait for a pass or maybe a throw-in from your teammate to score a goal. But with this strategy, you need to understand you cannot overcommit, because the second you overcommit on this strategy, it's more or less probably done for you on that play. And this strategy is completely risky because it leaves you vulnerable to not only a counterattack, but a long clear that can end up going in your net. So for this strategy, I wouldn't really recommend it to players probably like in champ and lower. Grand champs and up usually know how to sustain this strategy because that's where I see it the most, even though you don't often see many aggressors and defenders in Grand Champ. But usually when you do, that's the strategy that's usually used because players are much better up there. And finally, number 3, the more passive teammate. Now, in my opinion, I think these are the worst types of players. I know a lot of you are going to argue that the ball chasers are going to be annoying, but trust me, players that only know to play passively are the worst types of players anybody can get, especially for players that usually rotate out and in very well. With players like these, they sit back way too often. On a loose ball that could be 50-50 easily and you're on a rotation back, these are the type of players that just sit in net and wait for the ball to come to them, which is probably one of the most risky things you could do as a defender. Now, I'm not saying to lunge in for an attack. What I'm saying is kind of edging on the ball and let him just hit the ball so it doesn't come towards you, but more so kind of like let him get the ball away from him to give your teammate or yourself a chance to get on the ball. Waiting for a player to get possession and letting him do anything he wants while you just sit in net is the riskiest thing you can do and the worst. Now, as to to how to deal with teammates like these, I personally think it's the easiest. Because not only do you get to play more aggressively, but also you don't have a real rotation in the squad. What this means is, as the player that's not playing like the passive guy, you need to go for the ball more often than your teammate. You need to create plays yourself, and you kind of need to let your teammate or let him know that he needs to push up a little more. And not only is this the easiest to deal with, it's also the funnest to deal with because it lets you play more to how you want to play. You get to play more aggressively. You get to play more as the leader, more as the person that initiates things. And that's how every Rocket League player wants to play, but with a teammate that can actually rotate. But at the same time, with these teammates, you need to understand that you need to take more risks than they are, because their risks are different types of risks than you think. These are the type of players that let people take control of the ball and come at the net and just sit there and wait for them to do what they want. You cannot let that happen. If you get a teammate like that, you need to understand you can cut rotations. Not only can you do that, you need to do that, because you leave you and your teammate in possibly one of the worst scenarios ever, letting the opponent get control of the ball. That is the worst possible scenario any player in Rocket League can be in. Now, you see a lot of players respecting other players and letting them do what they want on the ball. If you're like a diamond or a gold, go ahead and do that. If you're a champ or higher, you need to understand players know how to flick the ball. Players know how to ground to air dribble the ball. Players know how to dribble the ball and then bump you out of net. They're not stupid and not as bad as they were before. As the player that's supposed to be playing more aggressively, when you have a player playing more passively, you need to stop respecting opponents and taking the ball off them if they have control. Now, in the scenario that you end up missing the ball or getting flicked over, that's when your teammate needs to take possession. And out of that point, it's really out of your control. It just goes on based on how your teammate reacts. They're most likely going to react and go for a clear, which leads me to my other point about passive teammates. They don't like taking control of the ball. They love just booming that ball out and clearing it. Now, of course, adapting to teammates isn't something you're just going to learn overnight. It's going to take time, hours, games, and even a lot of training to get to understand how to really adapt to players like these. Because even though I told you some methods that could work, they aren't going to work for every scenario you have, because there's also many other players, many other different styles of play that I have not seen, and I've put in maybe 3,000, 4,000 hours into this game. So it's really just based on knowledge and how quickly you're able to understand and adapt to how your teammate plays based on his strong suits and his weak suits. Now, for lower ranks, maybe adapting to teammates as much isn't as important as it is for higher ranks, for the sole reason a lot of the goals that go in and a lot of the ways that it's played in lower ranks, it's much easier to get away with mistakes and rotational stuff and mechanics and other stuff like that without being punished too heavily for it. But in ranks like champ and higher, adapting to teammates is so crucial because of the way it puts off of your teammate and yourself. Being able to manage yourself and your teammate in the same game is so essential to your style, and it's going to make you such a better player in the long run, and it'll help you rank up so much quicker than you think it will. So that's it for today, boys. That's all for today's video. I hope you guys learned a lot. Hope you understand what I was trying to say and how adapting to teammates is so crucial in the game in Rocket League. That's it for me. I'll see you on the next one. I'm out.